Okay guys, so today we're going to be building the folded card holder kit. This is a great kit that is going to include a 5-ounce exterior piece of Wicked and Craig leather, great for tooling, and then will contain 2 to 3 ounce leather for your pockets. We've done a couple tests and just found that you don't want this thing to be too bulky, so this is going to be ultimately a great item, all said and done. Every kit is going to include a choice of tiger thread. You'll have your choice of color and size, as well as harness needles included as well, depending on what size of thread you choose. The coinciding needles will be sent as well. Also, while there are a lot of tools that could certainly help make this project go a lot more efficiently, like your sewing machines, burnishers, different power tools and such, we're going to be building this project in the most straightforward way possible, just to concentrate on doing this fairly minimally, because if you're just starting out, or maybe this is one of the first kits, we want to promote that, you only need a small handful of tools to complete these projects. As mentioned, definitely important when you're starting out, or maybe this isn't something that you're sure that you're going to want to stick with. We're not looking to break the bank here to make these items. So with that being said, let's jump into the video. So I'm just going to bring you through what tools we're going to be using here today, give you a brief explanation of how we're going to use it, and of course you're going to see these tools in action in the video going forward. So first and foremost, we have our wing divider. We're going to be using this to mark where the stitching holes will be pierced through. This is just going to give us kind of a center line. We're using 4mm diamond punches. Of course, these are going to be used for puncturing the leather and making our stitching holes. Today we're using a barge cement to glue everything together. This is our preferred adhesive for the project, but a leather craft cement would be a good alternative, or even a standard contact cement. The choice is certainly up to you for what you'd like to use. We would recommend a barge cement though. We're using a sandpaper. I believe ours is 150 grit. This is just for finishing our edges, or getting rid of any excess glue that may leak out. You can find this at Home Depot or a hardware store in your area. Something in the 130 to 150 grit realm will probably be fine for you. We've got our number 0 edger from Barry King Tools. This is just going to be used for obviously putting a bevel on our edges, rounding them out, so when it comes to a burnishing, we get that nice finished look. We also offer a couple other variations of edgers. Barry King, certainly more on the expensive side. It is a fantastic, he does make some fantastic edgers. We've got our quick change set from Jeremiah Watt Tools. If you're buying your first set, or you want to try out something that's fairly nice, those edgers are quite impressive for the price. And we also have some other options from Weaver Tools as well. We've got our wooden hand burnisher or slicker. This is just going to be used to create some friction and burnish our edges. We've got our leather working hammer. This is just going to be used for any general hammering, but in today's case for this video, hammering down our stitches after saddle stitching. We have our poly mallet. This is going to be used for driving our diamond punches. We're using a rawhide mallet in the video. That's just what we have here in the shop, our personal preference. Feel free to use a rawhide mallet, or even a poly maul, or just anything that's going to give you that driving force. We wouldn't recommend using a standard hammer or something like that, as you may put a bit of stress on your tool, and dome out the back of that tool. So you definitely want something that's not going to create metal to metal impact with your tool. We're using a gum tragacanth or gum trag. This is just what we're going to be using for our burnishing solution. There's definitely a lot of burnishing solutions out there. I mean, if you have something you'd prefer to use instead, maybe you have your own solution. Maybe it's a YO Quick Slick. Definitely lots of stuff out there, but for today's case, Gum drag is pretty easily accessible, so that's what we're going for and trying to promote. We've got our CS Osborne Scratch All. We're going to be using this for our general marking, really in today's case, just lining up where our pockets are going to be sitting and marking for where we're going to be laying down our barge cement. And we've got our square. This is just me making sure that everything is looking good. Our pockets are squared up on our item, and we'll be also using that to make sure that the distance on our wing divider is set so that we're getting the right depth for our stitching line all the way around our item. And all of these tools can be purchased in our online store, which we will post a link to in the description of the video. Okay, so let's talk about dyeing our product. This is something that is totally optional. If you want to leave your item to be natural and develop a nice patina over time, you can certainly do so. At that point, we would definitely recommend sealing it. You can use a leather cream, maybe something with a wax finish. You could use an acrylic Vaseline, saddle sheen, whatever you have and whatever you prefer for sealing the thing up. Just helps, keep it a bit more clean, water resilient, will prevent, notable damage over time. But for today's case, we're going to be dyeing our folded card holder. We're using a jet black dye from Angelus Paints. It's a spirit-based dye, which means alcohol-based. We really enjoy this dye here in shop. We use it for a lot of our veg tan related items, and it gives you a really nice deeply penetrating dye, good balance. You're getting a nice consistent color across the board. Once we've gone ahead and dyed our item, today, as I mentioned, we're going to be sealing this item up, and I'm using a Skidmore's leather cream. It's really combination of beeswax and natural oils, and it'll just help seal and protect your item once it has been dyed. Or feel free to skip the dyeing process if you want to leave natural and just apply this sealant up. There's so many different ways to seal up your item. This is just a product that we really like here in the shop. It helps soften the leather, and of course it's going to give you some waterproofing. You will have to apply this over time, but I mean, the nice thing is that it doesn't completely seal this product up from adding a finish to it down the road. If you were to use, say, like an acrylic Vaseline or a tan coat, something like that, it's really going to clog the pores of that leather, and you're going to have to use a means to strip that back off to get any oils or that back into the leather when it's all said and done. So this is just a nice way that it's more natural, less chemicals, that type of thing, and this is something that we really prefer to use. So we're going to be rolling with the Skidmore's leather cream today. We're going to start by taking our exterior and our pockets, and we're going to lay the pockets in place on either side of the exterior. We're going to do this by taking them rough side to rough side. So the rough backs, we're going to put them facing into each other because we want the smooth side to be out and visible. Once we have them lined up, we're going to be taking our scratch awl and we're going to be marking where the pockets end. This is just so that we ensure that we're not spilling out our glue into the middle of the item itself. We want to keep this nice and clean, and this is just a bit of a safety precaution. I know some people who will just kind of eyeball it, and I mean, of course you're going to have glue that spills out, and that's not what you want. So this is just to be safe and make sure that we're getting a nice and clean item all said and done. For my item today, I'm roughly keeping the glue distance from the outside in about 1/4 of an inch. This is just my rule of thumb. I think that gives me enough that it's going to be nice and secure. It's going to, cover the area that I'm stitching, and, it's not going to be hindering me sliding my cards in and out. Um, Once we have both sides glued, we're going to go ahead and mark this up with our wing divider to give us our stitching distance around the outside. So we'll move on to that step now. First, we need to set a line so that we can use our diamond chisels to mark. So what I like to do is I'll take my ruler or my square, and I'm gonna mark my distance on my wing divider at 1/8 of an inch. And what this does is allows for me just to keep it consistent. If I was doing, say, a more in-depth item like a wallet or something like that, I want to keep my stitching the same throughout this process. So, not just eyeballing it, but knowing what distance you're setting your wing divider at is certainly important. And I mean, I've always done this from the beginning. So the biggest thing here is that we're going to want to flip over our item so that we have the smooth side of the leather on the exterior, and we're going to take our wing divider and we're going to mark all the way around our item. There's definitely no rush, especially when starting out with this. Take your time going around those corners, and you just want to make sure that the distance is consistent all the way around. When I was starting out doing this, I would definitely find that, if I kind of stopped paying attention for a second, my wing divider would kind of float off, and, if I'd find my way off of the project that I'm working on, and it doesn't look very good. So, make sure you've got a nice firm grip on your item. You're paying attention that the outside wing is against your project as you're going all the way around, and that's going to ensure that you're going to keep a nice consistent distance. So once you've got our line in place, we're going to move on to our diamond punching. So there's a few ways that you can put your stitching holes into your item. For today's case, we're going to be using a set of 4mm diamond punches. We sell these, of course, in our online store. They're a great way to get consistent stitching holes, as long as you are keeping the same distance all the way around your item. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to be taking the points of the diamond punches and I'm going to be aligning them in the center of our line, right? So you just want to make sure your points are dropping down in the center of the line. Pick a spot to start on the wallet here. I'd probably suggest picking one of your straights. Don't start on a corner, that type of thing. It'll just give you a bit more trouble in the long run here. So just pick a spot to start, and it really doesn't matter which direction you go. Just pick away and then just start heading that direction, and then eventually you're going to get to a corner, and then we're going to drop down from our long, I think it's a 9-prong diamond punch, down to a 2, and that's just going to help us get around our corners a little bit easier. I'm driving these through with my rawhide mallet. There's lots of different ways that you can drive these. Again, recommending something that has maybe a poly rawhide or something, so that you're not contacting these tools metal to metal. I've seen some videos where guys are doing that. You're more than likely to spread out the metal at the tip of your punch, and you don't really want to be ruining your tools that way. So this just gives a bit of padding without sacrificing any of the force. One thing I'll always do as well is I'll pick the last 2 marks from my last hole and then use those to start my next. It helps keep me in line and make sure that I'm going uniform. One other thing to note is that you really want to ensure that you're not leaning to one side or the other with your punches, because what will end up happening is that either your top holes going in might be fine, but it's when you're coming through that you're either going to be driving into your project or outside of your project, and your stitching is going to be doing the wave on the other side. So a way that I like to combat this is while I'm driving these, I'm always looking down the line of where my diamond punches are, and this helps me ensure that I'm getting a nice and straight up and down punch, or as close to as I possibly can. I find if I'm looking at this from the side, I'm not going to get that consistency. So it would probably be in your best interest to look down the line of where you're going to be going with it, because you can see everything straight, you're driving properly, and that type of thing. So once you've made your way around, we'll move on to getting into our stitching. As a general rule of thumb for determining how much thread I'm going to need to use, I'll typically spool out enough thread to make my way around the exterior of my project. In most cases, I'm going to take that length and I'm going to times it by use your best discretion, as if you're dealing with like a thick item, like say like a knife sheath or something where maybe you're going to have a welt, you might want to add a couple extra distances. And I mean, of course, you're going to figure out either you have too much and maybe you can dial that back by a length or something to that degree. But for today's case, since this is fairly thin leather, we're just going to be going for timesing that length of your item by 6. So you can kind of see me doing it here in the video. Once I have my thread length determined, I'm going to fasten my harness needles. To do this, I pull my thread through the eyelet of the needle and then pierce the thread with the needle, which will create a knot. Once I have that needle pulled through, I'm just going to yank down on the thread. Again, you can see here how I do in the video. This step, can be a little tricky to some. If you're not familiar with this, I saddle stitching or hand stitching, I definitely would recommend, taking a few minutes to either read the book, The Art of Hand Stitching by Al Stolman, or take the time just to watch a more in-depth saddle stitching tutorial video. And they'll go through that stuff in a lot more detail. The purpose of this video is really about the assembly of the item. We're not going to go into too much detail about the different types of saddle stitching and how to do these skills. It's just more so how we're putting this item together. We can certainly recommend some videos and resources. If this is a skill that maybe you're not so up on or you're looking to acquire, just leave us a little comment below and we'd be happy to discuss that in more detail. We're going to get into our saddle stitching. So with our saddle stitching, again, I want to reiterate that I'm not going to go into deep detail about how to saddle stitch, but rather just a quick run through of how I do it. If you're not familiar with this technique, there are a lot of great resources and books and YouTube videos that can get you on the right track. This is something that we definitely may cover in more detail down the road as its own video. Again, happy to leave you a comment below with some resources that we have found very helpful with hand stitching and saddle stitching. That would definitely get you on the right track. So I start by loading my material into the stitching horse. I'm going to be stitching back towards myself with the outside of my card holder on my right. I start by picking a hole to bring my needle through. It doesn't matter which side you start this. The biggest thing is that you want to have a needle on either side of your material. We're going to start by stitching back towards ourselves, and we'll be taking our needle in our left hand and coming in the next hole towards yourself. So once through, I take the needle in my right hand and make a cross with my left from behind the needle coming through. This is probably a little confusing hearing me talk about this, but again, this process is covered in great detail in the book, The Art of Hand Stitching, and in other videos. So once I have this, I'm going to flip my needle, so flip the cross, and come in on top of the left hand thread through the same hole to ensure that you do not pierce the thread. That's very, very important. If you get a knot or you pierce through, you're going to create a knot in your thread, and it's really just kind of a pain in the ass. We are using a tiger thread, so I have found in my experience this happens a little bit less as long as you're making sure to really make sure that you're coming in on top of that other thread. So if you feel yourself pierce through, a way that you can check this as well is just kind of tugging on the thread on the right side and pulling that knot back through. If you have gone through, just pull your thread back out, tug the thread in your left hand down, and just really ensure that you're coming in on top of that needle or on top of that thread. So once the right needle is back through the hole, wrap the thread closest to you over top, and then pull the right hand needle through. Pull your stitches snug, and repeat the process in the next hole. And then you're going to continue along until you have made your way back to where you initially started. And you're going to overstitch by 3 holes to secure your thread. At that point, there's guys who don't overstitch. They might do 1 hole, 2 hole. That's totally up to you. We're going to do overstitch by 3 holes. This is just going to secure everything up. I think it looks a little bit more clean. And we're going to finish our stitching by taking some heat or fire and getting that all soldered off and hammered down. We'll cover that in the next step here. To finish our stitches, we're going to cut them down to about 1/8 of the inch from the leather. And in our case, we're going to use a soldering iron. You can also use a lighter or a flame, and just to melt the thread down and kind of create a bit of a bead. That's kind of what we're going for. I've used both a flame and a soldering iron. If you have a soldering iron or you have the budget to pick one up, we would highly recommend it. You just get it's a little bit more of a clean effect. It just really beads that thread, and you can kind of just tuck it between a stitch, no problem. It looks really nice. So once we've gone ahead and melted our thread and soldered it off, we're going to take our leatherworking hammer and flatten down the stitches on both sides of your card holder. So we'll move on to doing that now. Once our stitching is complete, we're going to move into some sanding. So to use your sandpaper, it's typically going to come in a fairly big sheet. You can cut this down. I typically divide up my sheet of sandpaper into 4 to 6 sections, depending on the size of my item. In today's case, you can probably go into that 6-section realm just to, not use too much material, and that's really all you're going to need. We're going to use our sandpaper to smooth out our edges. If you have some sort of overhang for whatever reason, as long as you used your square to make sure everything was sitting good, you probably won't run into that. But, we're mostly using it here just to smooth everything out and remove any excess glue. And this is just going to help prepare your edges and give you a nice square edge to bevel and round off with your edger. When it comes to beveling the edge, you're going to be using your edger. Of course, use the edger you'd prefer to. For today's case, we're not dealing with a whole lot of material, so I'm using a number 0 edger from Barry King Tools. You could probably get away with a 1, maybe a 2. That might take off a little bit too much, but probably a 0. I've determined to be pretty good for this type of thing. And we're just going to be making our way around the circumference of the card holder on both the top and the bottom sides, and it's just going to help give some roundness to your item, and will definitely assist you in the burnishing process. my first step here is to use some gum trag and apply it to the edges that I want to burnish. I'm using my finger, but if you prefer, use a dauber or put on a glove. I've always just used my bare finger to do this. It hasn't fallen off yet, so it can't be affecting me that deeply. But of course, use your best discretion. Once we've applied our gum trag, we're going to take our wood slicker and we're going to create a fast back and forth motion in the slot on the wooden burnisher that best fits your leather. If it's too small, you're not going to get that nice burnish where it gives you a bit of roundness. So, if you're too small, just kind of move up to the next big size, or the size above it rather, and that'll do you some good. So the way that this process works is, because you're creating friction with wood to the leather, it's going to create some heat, and it's going to give you that, that nice glossy finished edge that, looks really nice on a lot of products. We highly, highly recommend burnishing, and, it just gives you an ultimately more clean effect for your item. And, that's how we finish all of our products here in the shop. So, take your time, make sure you're getting the results that you desire. If you have any issues with the burnishing, again, drop us a comment. We're more than happy to point you in the direction of some good resources for doing your burnishing. But it's pretty straightforward. It is with the standard hand burnishers, it is a little bit more time consuming. So, a lot of the times when you're not getting the effects you desire, maybe just spend a little bit more time with it and you should be able to get what you're going for. That's going to wrap up our folded card holder kit video. This kit retails for $18.95 and is available in our online store and of course physically in store as well. We're going to post links to the kit and tools needed in the description of the video. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or things you'd like to see in future tutorials, please leave your feedback below or reach out to us directly, and we would be happy to address those concerns. From all of us here at Longview Leather, we'll see you on the next build.